Can you feel the anticipation building? Everybody's ready for the afternoon session, so welcome back. My name is Matt Hickey. I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Dean for Research and for Graduate Studies as well, and I have the privilege of serving as MC for our Lightning Talk session. The Lightning Talks are so appropriately named, and they dovetail so nicely with our morning session where we really get a sense of the broad range of research across this college. You might have this morning had the opportunity to walk from one poster to the very next one and find a very different disciplinary approach, very different set of questions, different methodologies, but tied together by this underlining golden thread of this pursuit of healthy people and healthy communities. And we're going to see that manifest this afternoon with a series of lightning talks. This has always been such fun. Lightning talk session is filled with bursts of creative energy and flashes of insight, and we might even describe them as being electric. And that, I'm just referring to the MC, of course. The talks themselves are going to be even better, so stay tuned for some fun. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. For those of you that are veterans of Research Day, we have a new format for the lightning talks this year. So in the past, you've noticed we've raised the creative bar on how many animations we can fit into 3 slides. And so we decided we really want to hear the stories that are going on in the units across campus. And so we are modeling this a little bit on the 3-minute thesis model. Those of you that might be familiar with that. The 3-minute thesis competition, which here on campus was just a few weeks ago, is a single static slide. So 1 slide, no animation. Now, because we're such a generous bunch, we're going to give these fine folks 4 minutes for their presentations. We'll have 2 minutes for open Q&A. Our microphones, I think, are in the hands or will be in the hands in just a few minutes of my friend Michelle Foster. And then Brett Fling has got the other microphone. And so I want to point out we're going to have 4 minutes of presentation, 2 minutes talk. I'll introduce the next speaker, and we're going to move through this quickly. We do call it lightning talks for a reason. And so I want you to be prepared to get those hands up and ask those questions during that 2-minute window in which we have an opportunity to engage with our speakers. For our speakers, I want to draw your attention to this little gadget right down here on my left. It's very large, about 60 inches. Looks like a TV, but in fact, it's a countdown timer, okay? So when it gets to the 2-minute mark, it's going to change colors. It's easy to ignore, having done it myself on more than one occasion. And so the definitive, it's time to wrap up your talk, is the sound of my footsteps ascending those stairs to, to encourage you to give us a few minutes for the interaction with our colleagues, okay? So before we get started on the lightning talks, I do want to say thank you one more time and ask you to join me in saying thank you to Chance Lewis for a really, really phenomenal keynote address. And it's so fun to have alumni come back. We had an alumna last year, we had Chance this year, to come back and see how folks that trained here know our environment and our community are now flourishing in different settings all over the United States. And so please say thanks again to Chance for a fantastic. So for our lightning talks, again, we invited 1 faculty member from each of the college's 8 academic units. We also have this year's cohort of Dean's PhD student fellows who will present as well. Each lightning talk is just a brief overview of what that individual is doing from a research perspective. We've asked them to focus on innovation, integration, and impact. And again, they've got 4 minutes to share their topic with us, followed by a 2-minute question and answer period. And I really, again, want to encourage you to engage in the Q&A. And so without further ado, let me start with our first speaker, Dr. Mohammed Mehany from the Department of Construction Management. Mohammed, come on down.
So one crazy thing I thought literally is 15 minutes for every single one of us. Now I'm going to try to be really super fast and electric in the meantime. So here I'm going to blind you from my head by all that hail that's coming out of my bald. So I'm going to try to be very quick on this. So the innovation part, I was planning on 3 or 4 different things, but I want to talk about certain things that I do right now with some grad students that's very intriguing. How many of us heard about circular economy? Anybody? A little bit? So it's more about how can we keep every single material, construction materials and others, in the loop, in different types of industries as well. So right now, we're trying to get like really techy with it of how we use machine learning in advancing some models that it can recognize how much of a building or a piece of infrastructure can be recycled or it can be renewed, or it can be reused somewhere else. And then after that comes a very intriguing part, which is the problem with this is you have to incentivize people to do this. And for the industry right now, using actually new material is cheaper, believe it or not. So we had to invent some kind of inventory and a banking system for them. And how we can do that, the other innovative part of that was the blockchain. So we're trying to be using a blockchain as part of this transactional banking between different contractors, suppliers, big manufacturers, of how they can inventory the reuse and recycle so they can kind of use it from each other in a way. It's a long shot, but we're going to give it a shot. That's what innovative is, right? You have to go for the moon as much as you can. So that's really about the innovation that currently one of the things that we're doing. When we talk about integration, we're in construction management, and to be very sincere, sometimes it's kind of like you have to like really see how do I fit in this college. But I'm lucky, I'm not gonna lie, because one of the first things that I really can relate to the college, specifically in those specific vision and mission bullet points that I put up there, is some research I got into doing for the last 3 years or more, maybe 4 years, about mental health for construction workers. And it's very meaningful to me, and maybe I'm gonna even segue into the impact on that as well. But how I even do that, a lot of you might be looking like, this guy's an engineer, for God's sake. What is he doing in mental health, right? You should be asking that question. It's a very extremely lucky and very out-of-the-box thing. So like Matt, I climb a lot. So I got to join a lot of SAR teams sometimes as a volunteer. So a lot of times you see some really hard stuff when you're in SAR teams and trying to rescue operations and stuff like that. Search and rescue teams, if you're wondering what SAR is. And then one time, we're sitting between me and a bunch of others, and we're talking about how rough that can be also on people who are, because between all of us, I was the only professor, of course, right? Everybody else was like ex-military, paramedics, people are working in the nursing industry, and how hard it is for them to be doing this every single day. So out of mere curiosity, like nothing more, nothing less, I just looked up the construction industry. And I was like, what? I was thinking if it's like 100, it would be 50. It was actually the first or second on the mental health and suicide list between all the industries, which was for me mind-boggling. And at the time, we weren't doing much at all. So I was like, I should research this. There was no funding, there was no nothing, but it was just curiosity, really. And I really get into it head first, as much as I can, and then discovered a couple of chances. It's not the most funded piece of research that I do, but it's very meaningful. Why? Because of the impact as well. So I'll get quickly into the impact. Man, that countdown is fast. So getting into the impact, one time, I was actually, as a panelist in the National Academies of Science, the Transportation Research Board. They have a big conference. And at the end of the panel, we gave everyone, there's a lot of DOTs in the room, Departments of Transportations and Highways, and we gave them resources to use in case something happened, or how to use this to establish mental health hotlines, mental health programs in their departments. And then the next day, I didn't think about anything. It was great. It was very well attended. Everything was great. Next day in the morning, one of them stood up. We're just preparing to do the usual construction committee meeting in the TRB. And then he said, I want to tell you guys something. I was like, okay, gentleman from Alaska, go ahead. So it was Alaska DOT, and he said that night, he got a call from back home, and he used some of those resources that help in saving somebody's life, in a way. That, for me, was more than any impact I have ever done in my research. I don't care if I land $10 million grant. That's somebody's life. You never know what that life is really, really worth, right? So that was, for me, was the micro-level impact. The macro level, we do a lot of infrastructure research, things that we all, use in our daily life. And man, this is going quickly. Q&A, let's go. Thanks, appreciate it.
We do have time for a couple of questions. Brett Fling over here, Michelle Foster on the other side.
All right.
Be nice and play ball.
You got 30 seconds. You can ask hard questions, too.
Here we go. Run. About the circular economy, you
Yes.
said that it's easier or cheaper to use new material than recycled material.
Sadly, yes.
Sadly. Is it worth trying to educate the consumer? So some of us, when we buy fancy tech gear, it's like old gear that's been refurbished.
Sadly, like a lot of other things, you can educate as much as you can, but you will not get the majority of the market that way, sadly. Because a lot of people, the bottom line is the one that hits them the most. So if you can relate that to incentivization, policy, get the system to be bigger in mass, that's just like anything else, diminishing returns and all, same in the economy. If you get to that point, that is when you can start seeing the differences in prices and get to the point that they're buying it. That make sense? Yes. You're more than welcome. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you all.
I'm not used to having to play the tough guy, but thanks for giving me an opportunity. I appreciate it. Our next speaker is Dr. Laura Cole from the Department of Design and Merchandising. Laura.
All right. So my area in DM is interior architecture. You all have been in a green building. I'm curious. Did you know it was green? How did you know it was green? And did you know why it mattered? So that's an intro to my work. I study the educational potential of green buildings. When you think about it, green buildings really are, they're the stage for our daily lives, but there's so much more than that. They're really, in my view, one of the most tangible expressions of humanity's relationship with our natural world. We marshal resources from all over the globe to make the buildings that we use every day. And once these buildings are built, they have natural resources coursing through them, right? When you think about it, it's magic that we can turn on a faucet and have amazing, potable, drinkable water. Energy from the grid, mostly from non-renewable natural resources, keeps the lights on, keeps our devices charged. And building systems just keep the indoor air flowing and comfortable in the right temperature. But we're not always conscious of these kinds of impacts and the need for natural resources to support our lives inside of buildings. And this is something that really hit me during my time in design practice. This image on the bottom left is one of my last projects that I did before I became an academic. I was the interior designer, or one of the interior designers on this massive corporate project. It was a LEED Gold, that means certified green project, but you could walk in the doors of this building and really, truly never know it. So this is what really catalyzed my doctoral work many years ago. I really began to wonder, can green buildings become, can we become better storytellers with green building ideas? And I started this idea thinking, can the building itself be part of the storytelling potential? So that catalyzed my doctoral work. It took me to school buildings actually across the United States. One of them is the top right here. It's a nearly net zero school building in Northern California. What I found in that study is that even the kids and teachers using these buildings are not deeply knowledgeable and aware of what the green buildings that they use every day are doing. The biggest impact seemed to be if they actually were there at the time of construction. Another thing I noticed was that teachers themselves were unaware of green building practices and hesitant to even integrate these amazing buildings into their curriculum. So that finding shifted really the last decade of my academic career. So in my time as an assistant professor at University of Missouri, which is where I was before CSU, I helped to build an interdisciplinary team of science educators, design scholars, engineers, and educational technologists. And together, we have been building standards-aligned curriculum to teach formal green building education to youth, mostly in the middle school context. You can see us at the bottom left here delivering one of our first kind of clunky curricular units that was super hands-on, had lots of great lessons, but it was actually kind of difficult to deliver because there was a lot of material and time input to deliver these lessons. So where we moved from there was actually taking green buildings. There's a lot of data that's really intermixed and better expressed in computational models. So you see these ladies on the top left there, they're using one of our simulation tools. So our latest units are now using some of that computation, making the interface really friendly for middle schoolers, and it's helping them design energy-efficient one-room schoolhouses as part of an engineering design project. This work, and we also have some cool stuff we've done on green roofs as well as energy-efficient buildings. We've engaged over 40 teachers and about 1,500 students to date with this work. So you can see how some of this work has expanded well beyond the students who have these like amazing green buildings to the students who don't have buildings like this every day. We really hope we can spark some curiosity about maybe future career paths, but we're also really deeply committed just to helping the general public learn about green buildings, because we're all consumers, we're all users, some of us are owners of buildings. So our hope is that we can help support this knowledge, and that a more informed citizenry can also help bring these buildings into place, and that those buildings can then conserve precious resources. Thank you.
Questions? Plenty of time.
Really? Did I finish ahead of time? No. Okay. I was like, wow. Yeah. Okay.
Check is in the mail, my friend.
So I'm one of the people you talked about who has no idea about green building principles. So related to the last talk, do you use reclaimed materials to build them?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is where sometimes we have to start with our science teachers when we're helping them understand. Green buildings are so exciting because I think most people think light bulbs and maybe solar panels. And it really, truly, it goes in depth with all the materials, right? And where, if you think about where all these materials have come from, we use a lot of precious, timber and steel and metal and Earth's resources, right? And to build like the things in a tangible way. Yeah, and then all the systems use a ton of energy. So really most of the green building movement is geared towards climate change and reducing energy, but there's so much more to it. That's my quick response.
Is biophilic design integrated in green building at all? And is it more prevalent in one country compared to another?
I can't speak to the global impact of biophilic design, though I'll say it's been a massive growth in the research. Biophilic design is really the integration of green elements and natural elements, recognizing that that's really actually good for human health and well-being to do so. And so green buildings, like you won't see a green building that doesn't have some kind of biophilic design in it anymore, because that's so prevalent now. And you have, early on in the green building movement, we were all studying like the technical sort of engineering aspects, and now you see a lot more scholars actually studying those psychological and social impacts of green buildings, just like that. Yeah, great question. Good, thank you.
Next up, Dr. Kari Dockendorff from the School of Education.
Gender is not contained to a binary of man and woman. Gender is fluid and expansive. And so this is how I approach critical or quantitative research, through a critical and queer lens. Critical quantitative methods call for the use of data to represent educational processes and outcomes on a large scale to reveal inequities. Critical quantitative methods also call on us to question the models, measures, and practices in order to offer competing models, measures, and practices that better describe experiences of those who have not been adequately represented. And so my work aligns with these key tenets of critical quantitative methods by imagining new and better ways to measure gender. If we want our data to reflect accurately our student population, we need better measures of gender identity that don't erase certain populations and groups of students from existence. So if we look over here, instead of a binary categorical measure of gender of just man and woman, my research looks at different ways to measure by suggesting maybe we use some scales to measure gender. The top one being that we're measuring gender identity through levels of femininity, masculinity, and androgyny. And then the second set looking at gender expression, so more of a outward expression of your gender through femininity, masculinity, and androgyny. And so for these, so looking at these, where I took the impact of the work, so This work I was part of a team that got from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to create a guiding document on how to measure gender. And up until the end of January, that guiding document spoke to the NIH and NSF on how to measure gender within data sets. If I take this work over to my colleague Aramati Kasper in plant biology, we look at the ways that gender is taught through plant biology and really biology or nature in general, that we have very material evidence that says gender in a binary doesn't really exist anywhere. And if we're teaching gender as a binary, we're actually doing a pretty big disservice to students who are learning plant biology or biology in general, because gender has never been contained to a binary measure. I also partner with some people at Temple University and the Hope Center in getting access to their data to use some of these critical quantitative methods to analyze how we look at food and housing insecurity and what that tells us about transgender students on campus. And what that tells us about transgender students is, yes, they're experiencing higher rates of food and housing insecurity than their cisgender peers. Often if they've had experience with Pell Grants, the foster care system, they're experiencing even more rates of food and housing insecurity on college campuses. And so for me, taking this research further and exploring what are the ways that we can continue to push how we think about gender in more expansive ways, and finding new avenues to have that conversation in today's political climate. And that's my research.
She's really using the arms there. That's not fair.
Going forward, how would you plan on implementing programs into schools and universities to actually bring awareness to this, considering the fact that it's clearly not set up, trans individuals do not have a place in this world, it seems like, despite the fact that there's knowledge that they clearly do and they belong here. So how would you go forward with that?
Yeah, I think it's finding spaces like this or in schools having individual conversations right now. I think, unfortunately, having broad public conversations in K-12 settings specifically is putting people at risk at the moment. So continuing to push in other avenues around that, like I said, having individual conversations and continuing to publish this kind of work and putting it out there.
Thank you.
So I'm a lab-based scientist, so this is all a bit frightening to me. Can you give me an example of how an interpretation of data has changed when you've gone from looking at binary classifications to this continuous?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tested these scales in a project at the University of Utah while I was getting my PhD. And alongside some categorical measures of gender with these scales, we could see that, yes, transgender people are experiencing gender-based discrimination on campus, but also maybe people who don't necessarily identify as trans but present their gender in a non-normative way, they're still running up into those experiences of gender-based discrimination. And so the scales provide just more nuance to that data. Instead of it being more of a flat measure, we're getting more depth and nuance in that data. Yep. Yeah, thank you.
I'm pleased to introduce a new faculty member, Dr. Minghua Tang, who holds the Lillian Fountain Smith Endowed Chair in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition. Welcome.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Now we switch gears and talk about nutrition. I just want to add very quickly, I really like the idea of the lightning talks, it made me think very hard of what my favorite part of my research program is and what I want to talk about in this 4 minutes. So here is my slide. I realize it's the busiest slide of all, probably, but hopefully after this 4 minutes, it makes sense to you. So my research focuses on the prevention and treatment of obesity and its related comorbidities, and also how to employ nutrition and dietary intervention to promote the optimal metabolic health and development. So my current focus, or a significant portion of my current research, focuses on infancy and toddlerhood, because this is a critical developmental phase that has not been well studied. It is also a period of life that has this profound impact on the long-term programming of metabolic health and weight status well into adulthood. So the current research gap is that when you think about nutritional or dietary guidance for this age group, it's really very limited and also vague. For example, if you have a weaning infant that you're ready to start solid foods, asking your pediatrician is pretty much the same as asking your next door neighbor, because nobody knows better. Because there's really not a lot of evidence-based recommendation out there, because there's really not a lot of evidence or research. So this makes our research novel, because we strongly believe that infants deserve the same amount of attention in nutritional research as adults, if not more. And also, this is a time that would predict the long-term health, as I said, well into like when you're school-age children or adolescents, or as a older. So I think our group is one of the very few worldwide that could conduct this rigorously designed randomized controlled feeding trials in this age group. And that also our group has had these findings that has been reported by Forbes, New York Times, and also I have a screenshot on the upper right corner that our research has been highlighted by the Colorado CTSI, as it fills the gap in evidence-based infant feeding guidance. So I think with that being said, our research integrates very well within the mission of the College of Health and Human Science to promote the health and well-being of people, their environments, and also communities. For example, that we have a current large-scale randomized controlled trial based off the Metro Denver area that we recruited up to 300 infants. We follow them from 5 months up to 4 years, and we engage state-of-art stable isotope and ultrasound techniques to measure body fat. We collect urine, stool, blood, and saliva from these infants. That we measure gut microbiome. We also measure nutritional status of these infants as well. We also have a line of animal research that we could conduct mechanistic investigations that we were not able to do with human, like infants. So overall, our research has been funded by NIH, USDA, the Colorado CTSI, and many nonprofit foundations. Currently, NIH and USDA are both urging high-quality, randomized controlled feeding trials in infants and toddlers to fill the research gap that how nutrition or diet would impact infant growth and development, and also the long-term obesity, research. So I think overall that our team is really at the front line to provide the first evidence of how nutrition would affect growth, risk of overweight, and development in infants and toddlers, and beyond. So I'll stop there. Well, 1 minute for questions.
Are there any preliminary findings as to which solid foods might be better for infants or toddlers at this point in time?
There are some research. So the current recommendation is just consuming a highly diverse diet. But our research over the last decade has indicated that certain foods appear to be better in terms of promoting a healthier gut microbiome and also to reduce the risk of overweight in infants.
Hi. Have you noticed any difference in how the infants or toddlers respond to your interventions based upon whether they have a C-section birth versus a vaginal birth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So beyond nutrition or dietary impact, there are certain factors that I think are less easier to manipulate, and that would include mode of feeding and also C-section versus. So we did see that at least for gut microbiome, these two groups of infants respond very differently. So there are potential impacts of the mode of feeding on that. 0 seconds left. Thank you.
Next up, from Health and Exercise Science, Dr. Tom LaRocca.
Thank you. So my solution was clearly to smush about 10 slides into one, so we'll see how this goes. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm in Health and Exercise Science in our Center for Healthy Aging, and I call my laboratory in the top left up there the Health Span Biology Lab. And health span is the portion of our lifespan represented in green in the middle there between birth and death, during which we're basically healthy, functional, and happy. And that's before we develop those conditions in the red, which we call age-related diseases. And those are catastrophic to individuals, but they're also a big socioeconomic burden. So our goal as a lab in the dotted line over there is to contribute to what really is a broader effort to try to figure out how to increase health span, to extend that green zone and compress the red zone. I think we take a at least somewhat innovative approach in doing this and studying this. We'll do everything from studying cells that we grow in a dish to studies and experiments in mice and even testing in human research participants. We also do a lot of computational biology or bioinformatics in the yellow in the middle there to bridge observations across those different models. And what we're doing with all of that is trying to understand, as represented by those gears in the lower green zone there, the inner workings, the mechanisms or the events that cause our cells and our tissues and our bodies to age, with the hope that we can figure out how to target them therapeutically, and that could be with pharmaceuticals or supplements or even lifestyle interventions like exercise, and then compress that red zone at the end and extend the green zone, like I said. This is a personally important topic to me. My dad's pictured up there. Neither one of my parents had particularly good health span, but I think it's also very directly integrated with CHHS priorities in that we're really just trying to make or enable as many people as possible to live well into older age, like the gal down there in the lower right. In terms of impact, we've been really lucky to have some good support to study multiple topics within this overall topic, mostly related to brain aging and diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Those would include everything from the dark regions of the genome that are kind of poorly understood to inflammation that happens in the brain. And most recently, in a collaboration with Dan Lark in my department to, on that lower right picture there, study small particles that are secreted by cells throughout the brain and that seem to change as we age. And I just want to add one last I word of my own to this story, which is to say that the most important thing that I can tell you, I think, is that really this is all thanks to fantastic people. I've got a really great lab. I've been really lucky to have a lot of folks who are fantastic in the lab and some great collaborators up and down the Front Range. So it's a good opportunity for me to say a big thanks to them. And with that, I'll take questions.
That was the 3-minute version of the 3-minute pieces. Well done.
Have you studied epigenetics much and how it relates to aging and like reversing some of the detrimental effects of aging?
Yeah, that's a great question. We love epigenetics. So we have done quite a bit of work in that area. Some of the most epigenetics work we've been doing is related to that picture, the blue, and the picture of the virus there. Looking at the parts of our genome, everybody's genome in this room is 50% repetitive sequences that have a virus-like signature to them and have accumulated over years of evolution. And so typically those are epigenetically suppressed. But we think what's happening as we age and as our brains age is that they're becoming de-repressed and then active and contributing to inflammation in the brain.
Questions? So Dr. Bell chopping at the bit over there. We go.
I have a question. How are you taking into effect of different sex differences between male and female and different socioeconomic differences as well in both of those?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. This is not something that we've done a lot of work on, but it's a very important question in case you don't know. We study Alzheimer's disease quite a bit, and females are much more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease than males. We have some ideas about why that might be happening, but it's not a major focus of our research. It's something that we always talk about in lab meetings that we should spend more time on. Thanks for reminding me.
Had 20 seconds, Tom. What would be the strongest piece of advice that you would give to compress the red zone?
To compress the red zone, I think it doesn't take 20 seconds. It's just exercise. That's what I have to say from HES. No, I think all of the main healthy habits, but I should say that if we're talking about the brain primarily, there's a lot of good evidence for exercise. There's good evidence for healthy diet. And then really watching your risk factors is the other thing. Blood pressure, cholesterol, most of those things tend to predict pretty well.
You have time for one additional question.
I know you said it's more of an area that you want to research more, but what are some of the ideas behind why women are more at risk for Alzheimer's?
Yeah. I don't have time for this question, which is good because I don't have a great answer, but I'll just give you the feel for they range from everything, including genetics and epigenetics, and that could include some of these dark genome things that I was describing and the different chromosomes and different way that those are regulated, all the way up to the simple fact that women tend to live longer and therefore maybe are more susceptible to it in older age, although that I think has been kind of pretty well shown that that's not the main driver behind it. So everything from very molecular all the way up to more sort of social, I guess, demographic.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Next up, from Human Development and Family Studies, Dr. Nate Riggs.
Hey everybody, how's everybody's research day going? Yeah? All right. So I'm Nate Riggs, and I'm a prevention scientist. And one of the really great things that our field has done over the past 30 years is to be able to test preventive interventions for things like substance misuse, mental health challenges, violence, and other outcomes, public health outcomes, to demonstrate their efficacy in tightly controlled randomized trials. And then register those preventive interventions on registries of evidence-based prevention programs so that communities can select those programs that best fit their own unique context and culture. Okay, so what we haven't done a really good job of, though, is that once we have established these programs, we haven't done a very good job of being able to scale up these preventive interventions across school districts, across states, let alone across the country, so that they can have a widespread public health impact. All right, now why is this? One of the reasons why this is it's a workforce issue. We have not created the requisite supply or demand of formally trained prevention practitioners out in the field that can implement these programs with fidelity. And that is where the CSU Prevention Research Center comes into play. In alignment with our college's land grant and community engaged mission, we have partnered with federal, state, and local partners, funders, to create this wonderful, lovely model, 3-level model, for providing prevention training and technical assistance for those who are out in communities implementing these prevention programs. So in level 1, what we've done is we've created a whole host of online, on-demand, relatively light touch. If we build it, we hope they will come, and we know that they are because we're tracking our analytics on our website. These research to practice tools, prevention workbooks, guidebooks. We're co-creating a learning management system with Penn State University with prevention modules across all things prevention, from capacity building to identifying and selecting evidence-based programs, implementing them with fidelity, adapting them when needed, evaluating them continuously for program improvement, and then sustaining long-term. So that's our level 1 training. Our level 2 training is where we actually go out into communities and spend time with communities for a day or two in providing prevention trainings to networks of prevention practitioners to increase their capacity to be able to implement these programs well and have an impact. We have been as far away as Craig, Colorado in the Northwest. We've been as close as the Spur campus in Denver. In the fall, we're heading down to Otero County. We're heading to El Paso County to work with networks of prevention providers. And then in our level 3 prevention training and technical assistance, this is where we really get to roll up our sleeves with our community partners in long-term, maybe hopefully 1 to 3 year partnerships where we are working alongside our prevention partners as they are making decisions related to prevention in real time so that we can assist them in making decisions on, hey, how do I identify and select a program that's going to work in my community's unique context and culture so that it's going to have its biggest impact. So those are our three models, our 3 levels. We just developed that logic model. I hope you all can read the fine print there in the fall. So pretty innovative, pretty new. We're one of 2 university-based prevention training and technical assistance centers in the entire country that are university-based. And so yeah, we're now evaluating, we're starting to evaluate this logic model, although albeit in kind of a piecemeal fashion. We know that our community partners that engage in our level 1 and level 2 training and technical assistance demonstrate statistically significant increases in the medium to large effect sizes in prevention knowledge and awareness across the prevention process. We know that our community partners that engage with us in our level 3 training are more likely to implement youth prevention programs that statistically significantly decrease depression, anxiety, negative mood, increase coping skills, school connectedness, among other outcomes. And so I'm going to be spending next year on my sabbatical, thank you, Dean Youngblade, figuring out more robust ways to test, robust and ethical ways to test this community-based approach comprehensively so that we can ensure that the programs that are being implemented are going to have a widespread population public health impact. All right. Devin was a student in my prevention science course a couple of years ago.
And not paid for this question. How do we address, maybe jump over or break down the barrier of cost for these evidence-based practices? They are much more expensive than YouTubing how to support regulation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are a number of different ways that one of the ways is that states can provide grant funding for programs like this. So the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment has a couple of opportunities for that. We get grants, we find grants for our community partners, and those programs are funded through those grants oftentimes. But yes, sometimes they do come with a cost, and that's something that goes into the calculus of which programs communities will ultimately identify and implement.
I have a question. So I was wondering, I'm
Where are
right in
you?
front of you actually.
Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry, that's a little bright.
So who exactly are you training to be doing this work? Are you looking at healthcare practitioners? Are you looking at specific community members in that community? Because we know that that definitely increases involvement and, the correct, better outcomes?
Yeah, there's a number of what we call prevention delivery systems. Among them are schools, the juvenile justice system, child welfare system, and in some of the cases, they are trained clinicians. These are the programs that are more on closer to the treatment end of things, and in other instances, they could be just community citizens who are interested in implementing these programs and really want to do something for their community. And there's a more robust, I guess, prevention delivery system oftentimes in urban areas and maybe less so in rural areas. And so it oftentimes is this kind of grab bag of, eclectic group of folks who are implementing these programs, but in most cases, they're not formally trained in actually how to do prevention. So, thank you, Nate. Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick comment. If our time constraints oblige me to interrupt before questions get asked, I really do hope that you'll reach out to our speakers. One of the plans for a day like today is to start conversations, not stop them, but start them, and so we can have interactions that extend beyond a wonderful Tuesday in March. And so our next speaker, Dr. Jen Weaver from the Department of Occupational Therapy. Yep, your groupies are with you. What? Got a crowd.
Apparently, yeah. Oh, this is bright. Great to see you all. Misdiagnosis happens in 40% of unconscious patients after a traumatic brain injury. These patients are often mistakenly diagnosed to a lower level of consciousness. When you're diagnosed to a lower level of being unconscious, that limits important access to rehabilitation and may even lead to early withdrawal of life support. Colloquially, we all hear about patients who are comatose. However, somebody who is comatose has no brain activity. There are 3 other states of being unconscious. One is the unresponsive wakefulness syndrome, which is when you show arousal in sleep-wake cycles. Another is when you're minimally conscious. That's when the person has some awareness to their surroundings. When I walk into the hospital room, they'll turn and look at me and watch me walk across their room. We get really excited when they emerge from the minimally conscious state, and that's when they can demonstrate functional communication, which on this ruler that you see here is a 2 on the communication item, or when they can use a functional object like a hairbrush or a toothbrush, and that's when they score a 6 on a motor item. Therapists determine these states based on observing behaviors, but these criteria have never been empirically tested. As a translational health scientist, my goal is to create tools that improve rehabilitation. Currently, therapists use the Coma Recovery Scale Revised, which scores patients from 0 to 23. And that's the blue line across the middle. However, this scale is ordinal, meaning it categorizes patients, but should not be used to describe magnitude of improvement. Families, however, they focus on the total scores. They want to know how close their loved one is to a score that might indicate emergence. To improve accuracy, I transformed this 0 to 23 ordinal scale into a 0 to 100 equal interval scale, revealing that early improvements at either the ends of the scales actually reflect more significant improvements. A 0 to 1 reflects 11 units, whereas a 5-point change from 7 to 12 also reflects 11 units. Here we start to level the playing field so that the new 0 to 100 unit scale is easier to interpret and determine when a change is a true patient change versus erroneous inferences from an ordinal scale. This equal interval scale also demonstrates when behaviors are of comparable difficulty. Therefore, I proposed updating the diagnostic criteria for emergence because a 4 on the auditory item is in alignment with the 2 on communication as well as a 6 on motor. We co-created this recovery ruler that is now used in rehabilitation systems with family caregivers and rehabilitation practitioners. Ultimately, this tool helps therapists and families track progress more precisely. Currently, I'm working with a team to integrate this tool into the electronic medical record to support the sustainability of its implementation across rehabilitation centers. This will ensure that unconscious patients who cannot advocate for themselves receive optimized clinical outcomes with results that can be interpreted by their families and therapists to ultimately support shared decision-making.
For your CRS, our items, that column right there, you have communication and verbal oromotor. Can you describe the differences between two? And also, since auditory is in there, I imagine some of that communication can be nonverbal communication as well?
Correct. So this is a scale that's the gold standard currently in the field. Communication really goes from no communication to functional, intelligible communication on the communication scale, whereas the auditory scale is really about hearing a command and following that command. And then verbal oromotor reflects more of our mouth movements and gestures. Great question.
Okay, hi Jen, I have a question. I was wondering if you've seen the use of your scale impact discharge planning and stays at various healthcare settings.
So I hope to look at that in the future. However, in the rehabilitation field, in acute care, unfortunately, quite a few places are requesting that therapists do not discuss discharge. So a future adventure of mine in research is actually trying to create an educational handout about the different types of post-acute care rehabilitation for families.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Great presentation. I had a question from my clinical experience. We know that deterioration in your, arousal level or something does decide about the ventilation. So let's say your patient is in ICU, they get ventilation off, and if the arousal level deteriorates, they get into the ventilation. Were you able to kind of like check the sensitivity of the more sensitive and refined scale that you have created out of 22 to 100? Were we able to predict the people who should be going into ventilation back to, severe level of the ventilation versus one should be withheld with the traditional measures and should not be taken for the ventilation? Was there any something we could come up with?
So I have not done studies that look at prognosis or things of that nature. However, one thing that we are seeing in the literature is that folks that we're able to track over time, over 40% of them make a functional change, meaning they can actually start participating in everyday activities like getting dressed, eating with their family. And so oftentimes what we're seeing happen is that we're actually withdrawing care too early in the ICU stages.
I am pleased to introduce another new member of our College of Health and Human Sciences family who happens to hold a brand new chair in the college as well. So Dr. Shelby McDonald holds the inaugural Saruma Bliss Endowed Chair in Human-Animal Interaction in the School of Social Work. Shelby.
Hi everyone, I'm Shelby McDonald. I use she, they pronouns. As Matt said, I hold the position of Saruma Bliss Endowed Chair in Human-Animal Interaction. You might be wondering what exactly is human-animal interaction and why is this situated within the College of Health and Human Sciences? And that's a question I love to answer because it brings us all closer to understanding the profound reciprocal connections between people and animals and how these relationships impact our health, our well-being, and our society. The field of human-animal interaction examines the diverse and meaningful ways in which humans and animals connect, such as the companionship of household pets and the utilization of animals in therapeutic settings. The field of human-animal interaction also investigates how these relationships can support mental and physical health, enhance human developmental processes, and contribute to individual and community well-being. So now I'd like to take a quick survey of the audience. Raise your hand if you currently live with a pet or have ever had a pet. Now take a look around you. Okay, 70% of US households in the US have pets. Not only do we choose to live with other species, 97% of families view their pets as family members. Not only are they important to us, 86% of pet owners believe pets support our mental health, and 85% believe that our pets help to alleviate loneliness. So these statistics not only reflect the deep bonds that we have with animals, but it also highlights the necessity of integrating these relationships into broader health practices, social services, and other support systems. Yet despite the clear benefits, there are still considerable challenges of having pets. For instance, 25% of households struggle to access veterinary care, and 70% of renters have difficulty finding pet-friendly housing, with marginalized and racialized communities experiencing the most difficulties in access. Additionally, up to 25% of pet owners find that their pets actually complicate their personal health care. So in response to these issues, my work is focused on understanding the impacts of human-animal bonds on health and well-being, and conducting research that aims to address and mitigate pet-related barriers within healthcare and social service settings. So one area my research has explored is the use of pet abuse as a coercive tactic within domestic violence situations, which has led to our advocacy for pets to be included in protection orders. We've also championed pet-inclusive sheltering in both domestic violence and disaster settings, because our research has shown that a lack of pet-friendly sheltering can actually deter individuals from seeking safety, leading to death of both people and pets. We've also extended our research to support the LGBTQ community, exploring how interactions with animals can improve LGBTQ mental health and provide unconditional acceptance and emotional support amid harmful interpersonal and societal challenges. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we examined how bonds with pets led to delays in testing and treatment for COVID, particularly among people with low levels of social support. So across these areas of research, our findings highlight the very critical need for more robust and integral social and health systems that can accommodate the needs of contemporary families, which include pets. So in response to this, our team is working to incorporate cutting-edge methodologies such as ecological momentary assessment to capture real-time data on how pets influence our health and our mood. Additionally, we're working to integrate biological markers such as cortisol, cytokines, and oxytocin to objectively assess the stress-reducing and biological benefits of human-animal interaction. So these innovative tools will help us quantify the effects that pets have on human health and well-being. So in conclusion, our team's research on human-animal interaction extends beyond basic academic research into transformative solutions that aim to improve the lives of people, pets, and communities. Integrating human-animal interaction science into health and social policy work can foster a more compassionate and more holistic approach to promoting individual and community health, approaches that are more responsive and more inclusive of contemporary families. Thank you.
Has it been discussed kind of combining the benefit of being able to have someone to temporarily foster your pet while you're receiving health care, treatment, or rehab with somebody who might want that temporary support from the animal, and kind of creating that partnership between different organizations?
That's a great question, the exact question I wanted you to ask, to be honest. So we really lack a lot of services to help folks out. Let's think if you're wanting to go into substance use treatment, you're someone with a low level of social support, you don't have someone to take care of your pet, for example. Yet you need that treatment, right? So where do you go? Do you put your pet up for adoption in a shelter to get treatment? So this is something we're working on here at CSU, actually. And I don't know if anyone knows Becky Nemick. She just started a nonprofit organization called PACT, which I'm on the board of, and we need volunteers. So if you're interested, please ask me about that after the talk today. But yeah, what you've said is exactly right. We don't have these support systems built into our societal structures, and we need them. And the more that pets become a part of our daily lives, the more important these services are. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That was great. I'm curious about the tools that you were describing, the new ones that you're developing. They sound very neat. What are the challenges of validating those, and do you do trials versus just rolling them out into the
Yeah,
field?
are you talking about like ecological momentary assessment or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now we're trying to get funding for a pilot study, specifically looking at the impacts of daily interactions with dogs on perinatal mental health. And so yes, we'll be doing a lot of testing, but I have some great colleagues who do EMA work, and they've been able to use these protocols in other situations. And so the key is really getting the pet-related data integrated and make it compelling for NIH.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's always fun to introduce our next speakers. Of course, since Dean Youngblade took her leadership role, we've been able to support Dean's PhD student fellowships every year. These are $20,000 awards that are meant to be on top of GRAs or GTAs, not meant to replace them. And we have fun reviewing those in the research committee every year because every one of them is excellent, and we are perpetually trying to figure out ways to fund them all. We can never do so. But we've got a cohort of 2 this year, and our first Dean's PhD student fellow is Andy Hagen from Health and Exercise Science. Andy.
Hello, everybody. Multiple sclerosis is a neurodegenerative disease that affects the central nervous system. And specifically what happens is we have these myelin sheaths that wrap around our axons, but our immune system actually attacks these. And in turn, what happens is we get this damage to this really important structure that helps boost the speed of signals going between the brain and the body. It leads to a lot of different symptoms as a result of this neural impaired communication, but one of the most primary ones is mobility impairments. Over 90% of people with MS report having some sort of walking impairment at some point in their disease course, and unfortunately, most of them also report this being the #1 factor decreasing their quality of life. So the innovation that I've been working with my Dean's Fellowship is a specialized form of gait training along with neurostimulation to try to make it more effective. This integrates well with the college mission, specifically looking at physical well-being, trying to improve the walking performance and mobility in people with MS. So specifically what we do is we have this goofy treadmill that has 2 different belts that can go at separate speeds. People with MS oftentimes have one leg that's more affected than the other leg. And what we can do here is we know that this leg has less strength, has less function, but if we put it on a faster paced belt compared to the good leg, we can make this other leg take bigger, longer, more powerful steps that are more symmetrical to the good leg. And improving this walking symmetry does a whole host of things, but one of the most primary ones is decreasing our overall risk for falls as well too. So this is a really important thing we want to do to be able to improve quality of life for people with MS. Now, additionally, what we're doing is we're applying what's called transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, or TENS, to their legs while they're doing this gait training. TENS is an easy-to-use, cost-effective, portable device. You can see it on one of our participants' legs here. And what it does is it improves the communication from the body up to the brain. How this works is it adds an electrical signal to the neurons in the legs that increases the number of signals sent up to the brain and how fast they're sent. So hopefully by doing this, we can circumvent some of this damaged myelin that we see and overcome that as well too. So what we see here, if you look at that green line for me, this is what happens when you walk on this goofy treadmill. At first, we have a lot of asymmetry with our walking, represented by a lower value, but slowly over time, we improve this asymmetry, and we slowly become more consistent and less asymmetrical when we're walking. This demonstrates that the brain is learning this new, more effective way to walk. Now, I was a little bit deceptive. This figure is actually from a retention test 4 weeks after our main intervention. And what we found is that when we have this TENS stimulation turned on, we actually improve how fast we get these asymmetry improvements, and we improve overall how few asymmetry we have at the end of it as well, too. This shows us that TENS is improving how well it's stored in the brain, this new effective walking pattern, and how well it's recalled, demonstrating that we have better long-term retention when we have this stimulation in people with MS. We also measured brain activation during this set of studies as well, too. Oftentimes, people with MS have greater activation when they're doing motor tasks like walking in order to compensate for some of this neuronal damage. We saw that when we had TENS applied during the gait training, they actually had less activation in their brain, which tells us the brain is being more effective and more efficient at communicating with the body. and demonstrates that better learning and more effective learning is taking place. So overall, we found that with TENS turned on during these, that we have improved behavioral performance with the learning and more effective neurophysiology of the learning as well too, demonstrating that what we can have with this is probably more effective and more useful retention of different types of walking rehabilitation in people with MS. Thank you so much.
It's coming fast. So going forward, what would be your plan to actually translate it into real life? So obviously you're using the treadmill and you're using TENS now, and that's no longer available. What are you looking at to translate that?
Absolutely, that's a great question. You would love my first chapter of my dissertation. So a lot of different populations have used a specialized form of gait training before and have shown improvements like this, but the number one issue so far is we can't translate it very well outside of the lab, right? So when we're testing how people walk in the real world, how well does this translate? And things like neurostimulation could potentially improve that, and that's something that I'd definitely be interested in looking at going forward. But really what we need to do is find out ways we can teach people how to walk in different ways that are more ecologically valid, more like their open environments. So definitely a good question and something that research needs to look into more, I would say. Yeah, great question.
With the TENS device, do you put it on multiple muscles at the same time in the leg, or are you targeting specific muscles at a time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it definitely depends. For our study, what we did is we targeted specific muscles. So specifically in MS, the tibialis anterior, or the muscle that makes your foot go up, is really impaired. And we also did it on the quads as well too for some of those hip mobility measures. But it can really be used on any muscles. So there's been research in upper limb function as well too. Not specific to MS, but other populations as well. But it seems to be, it can be pretty specific to specific muscles and improving their communication to and from the brain.
Hi. Is there any potential for people who have MS that have already lost the ability to walk? Is there any potential for this to maybe gain some of that function back, even if it's not full function, but just for maybe some exercise to improve strength overall?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different methodologies you can use with this. This is definitely a more challenging walking task. So for my specific study, it definitely does require some mobility, but things like TENS and other devices can be beneficial for improving communication between the muscle and the brain, which is really helpful for kind of getting at how can we make some of these different types of rehab more accessible to more people, for sure. That's a great question. Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
I want to commend Andy for being unflappable. You might have noticed me over there several times during his talk. His countdown timer screen went black. So I felt like I was attached to a TENS device a couple times during your talk, but luckily the timer actually continued. It simply was a display. Otherwise, we'd be rebooting it to 6 minutes, and you would have had all afternoon to talk to us. Our next speaker from the Department of Human Development and Family Studies is Brock Rigsby.
My name is Brock. I'm a Dean's Fellow, and my research focuses on the associations between romantic relationships and health outcomes. This year, I've been focused on a novel theoretical construct developed here at CSU by Dr. Rachel Lucas Thompson, known as mindful partnering. Romantic relationships are a particularly potent stressor for most adults. Even when things are going well, relationships are likely to have stressful moments because our brains were built for war and not for love. Close personal relationships are well-established predictors of mental and physical health, so much so that some studies have even suggested that having a healthy romantic relationship is as important for long-term health as diet and exercise. Secure and supportive relationships benefit us emotionally, but they also help us to do things like fight off disease and heal physical wounds faster. If this balance between supportive and stressful, helpful and hurtful is so beneficial yet so precarious, why do more couples not participate in couple therapy? Traditional psychotherapies for couples are expensive and often inaccessible. Alternatives might not feel tailored enough to specific needs, and couples often feel uncomfortable discussing their most significant and intimate challenges with another person. For individuals, mindfulness, or the act of paying attention to the present moment with qualities of openness and non-judgment, has well-established benefits for mental and physical health. That's right. Focusing on what's happening now, as opposed to what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow or next week, allows us to buffer our body's physiological stress response and essentially reduce the effects of a stressor. Most people think that mindfulness is an individual, internal process, but mindfulness can be applied interpersonally. It has been applied to parent-child relationships and friendships, and the benefits for those relationships are stunning. So why not harness those benefits for couples as well? My work with Dr. Lucas Thompson is doing just that. I'm working to provide key conceptualization and observational measurement tools for the mindful partnering construct. Mindful partnering includes 5 factors: mindful awareness, non-reactivity in conflict, emotional awareness of one's partner, acceptance and compassion for one's partner, and self-compassion within the context of a partnership. Each of these factors is innovative in that they each apply mindfulness-based practices to romantic relationships. As I noted before, each of these practices has strong empirical support for mental, physical, and relational health. Although internal mindfulness is well supported, we're among the first to apply interpersonal mindfulness to romantic relationship dynamics. Early tests of just one factor of mindful partnering, which were conducted outside of our lab, suggest that this new mindfulness of self and other approach is an even stronger predictor of relationship health than individual mindfulness alone. Mindfulness-based interventions are well-liked, efficacious, and appropriate for delivery in clinical and non-clinical settings. Essentially, they're effective, enjoyable, and even though they can be delivered by trained clinicians, they don't have to be. That means that mindful partnering is more accessible and could come to a home near you without the expensive and possibly uncomfortable process of seeing a couples therapist like me. If DIY isn't your speed, the observational measurements we're developing also have the potential to benefit couples therapists in the therapy room. My Dean's Fellowship project has established preliminary indication that interpersonal mindfulness expressed in mindful partnering is external enough that it can be observed. And even better, the behavioral indicators that my team has identified are highly modifiable, meaning that our scientific measurement tool could help therapists decide where to focus their efforts during sessions, or eventually lead to a new evidence-based therapeutic approach altogether. Thank you.
That was so fun, thank you. I'm curious if some of the practices would look similar to, like, if you're a person who does mindfulness on the individual level, like, what would the practices look like for a couple?
So a lot of this happens between, this is sort of a difficult thing to describe, but basically I ask people in therapy sessions to be mindful of their partner's responses through external cues that their partners are expressing, like facial cues, minor things like sighs or changes in breathing speed, and to be really attuned to their partner's experience while they are also attuned to their own experience. So a lot of the practices would be paired with an individual intrapersonal mindfulness practice, and then additionally add the skill of attempting to be mindful of your partner through their behavioral indicators.
Additional questions?
So understanding that we're looking at this from a perspective of wanting to make it more accessible and take it outside of a therapeutic setting, what would that look like in a concrete way for it to, for it to be applied in a way that anybody can access it?
So I think everybody in this room is acutely aware that science moves slow. So this is brand new and the first publication happened in 2021, relevant to mindful partnering. But down the road, it's possible that interventions could be developed appropriate for delivery in community settings by non-trained clinicians, which are easier to access because we could teach things in schools for teenagers to benefit and learn healthy relationship practices before they ever engage in their first significant romantic relationship, but also this would be something that could be transformed into an app-based approach or something along those lines to be integrated for free or at a very low cost into people's homes.
Thank you, Brock.
Thank you.
I have the pleasure of sharing a couple important and exciting announcements. This is news about the college. The first announcement is going to be our two new Dean's PhD student fellows. They'll start their fellowship on July 1st, and we're always delighted to be able to share and congratulate together. So once again, these Dean's Fellowships are $20,000 awards. These are competitive, and when I say competitive, on the average, the funding line is about 15%. So we get 15 to 16 really innovative proposals every year. We can fund 2 or 3. We're always delighted as a research committee to have the opportunity to review those, but we also grind our teeth a little bit again because they're really good and we have our work cut out for us. So I want to start with a word of thank you to the college research committee for joining me on this fun but challenging review process. So we have 2 new Dean's PhD student fellows that we'd like to introduce today. And if they're here, again, I'm going to ask you to stand, and if your mentoring team happens to be with you, I'm going to ask them to stand as well. So our first Dean's Fellow is Steffi Joslin from Human Development and Family Studies. Steffi's proposal is entitled The Roles of Adolescent and Parent Depression in Adolescent Cardiometabolic Risk. Steffi is mentored by Drs. Lauren Shoemaker, Stephen Eishley, and Sammy Brown. So congratulations to the entire team. Our second Dean's Fellow is Anjali Tiwari from Health and Exercise Science. Anjali's proposal is entitled Cognitive Variability as an Early Predictor of Vascular Cognitive Impairment in Stroke Survivors. Her mentor is Dr. Neha Lodha, who happens to be here, yes. And so please join me again in congratulating our 2 new Dean's Fellows who will be part of next year's Lightning Talks. I have another exciting announcement. Many of you will know that last fall we held the first annual College of Health and Human Sciences Teaching Colloquium. This celebration of teaching excellence was an interactive event where faculty, staff, and graduate students participated in activities to exchange ideas that promote exemplary teaching practices. We enjoyed a keynote address, a panel on the event theme of teaching effectiveness and student success, presentations by last year's Dean's Faculty Teaching Fellows, Drs. Ashley Harvey and Leanne Kaiser. Participants engaged in interactive innovation stations from teachers all across the college, as well as our partners from TILT. We're already planning the second annual event for next fall, where we'll look forward to hearing from this year's Dean's Faculty Teaching Fellows, Drs. Julie Taylor-Massey and Molly Gutilla. So please stay tuned for an upcoming announcement for the fall 2025 Teaching Colloquium in terms of the date, the call for innovation station proposals, and additional details. In addition, we will soon be sending out a call for nominations for the 3rd cohort of the college's Dean's Faculty Teaching Fellowships. Now, before we take a short break, I'd like to invite Dean Youngblade up to share a few thoughts with us.
Man, what a day. What a day. We have had such a phenomenal research day. This is our 6th year of doing it, and just some stats for you. We've had the biggest number of posters this year, a sold-out lunch, tremendous participation in the lightning talks, and most importantly, I want you to think about a couple of things. We've had undergraduates, graduate students, faculty members of various ranks and levels, staff involved in this, all centered for the past 5 hours on our why we show up to work every day, why we work together to generate new knowledge, how we work together to educate our students and educate each other and learn from our students. We've had a day of impact across all of our disciplines and in the ways that these disciplines intersect, the ideas that are sparked in a field like construction management and thinking about how mental health is an important part of that. I saw a poster this morning from a student who was designing eyeglasses that measure glaucoma and adapt vision to changes in glaucoma. This interdisciplinary work, the work we do in each of our departments, is just full of impact to make this world that much better. Each one of us, each one of our students are forwarding innovation, they're forwarding great ideas, and this community that we have together to share those ideas, those innovations, the thoughts for our future is nothing short of phenomenal. So today, for 5 hours, while the winds are howling outside, not literally, but it's a really actually nice day outside, so thank you for being inside. But figuratively, there's a lot of pressure on what we do, on our research, on our teaching, on the existential question about education. And today, for 5 hours, we were mindful together about being in that space and reminding ourselves, motivating ourselves, and encouraging ourselves to keep up this amazing work. I could not be prouder of this college and the work that you do. So thanks for a great research day. We're not quite done yet. We have an awards presentation coming up at 3 where we'll celebrate awards in various categories. But for right now, I hope for a minute, maybe just close your eyes, visualize what today has felt like, the work that we do, the excitement about the work we do, and I want you to take that feeling with you. Take it and share it, and let's keep this story going. Thank you, college.